is CNN Breaking News.
I got to talk about something important now, okay? And that is golfing. So, excuse me, everyone. Even the president went golfing today. CNN got exclusive footage of the president golfing yesterday. But today, a large white box truck was parked to block the shot. When our photojournalist moved the camera, the truck moved to block the picture. And remember when the president said this?
If I win, I may never see my property. I may never see these pieces again. But boy, is Eric and the kids going to have a good time, right? They're going to have a good time. But because I'm going to be working for you, I'm not going to have time to go play golf. And believe me, believe me, folks.
Believe me. And then he said this about the former president golfing.
Obama ought to get off the golf course.
I'm going to be working for you. I'm not going to have time to go play golf.
He's played more golf than most people in the PGA Tour.
He played more golf last year than Tiger Woods.
All right, so listen, just to put this up, do we have video? We've got Obama. We should have Obama and Bush. We've gotten video of all of them playing golf before. Do we have that? There we go. There's President Obama. Nobody said anything like, "Oh my gosh, the cameras are catching Barack Obama playing golf." The only person who said anything about it was who? Donald Trump. And let's see, Bush playing golf. Oh, there it is. President Bush playing golf as well. So President Trump has now spent 87 days at one of his golf properties, and the problem isn't the president playing golf. We think our president should relax. The problem is the hypocrisy here, and no one, again, seems to care about the hypocrisy, not even him, and trying to block reporters. That's what reporters do. They show what the President of the United States is doing. When you're the President of the United States, the voters should know where you are at all times, and you should not be blocking pictures.
Right. Well, this, again, we also know that one of the things that's made Donald Trump different is a kind of hostility to the press, which is really unprecedented for a modern president, a man who really has tried in a whole variety of ways to kind of cow the press and make the press an adversary. And this is just one part of it, you know. I think the other point is worth mentioning is that, you know, Ted Cruz called Donald Trump a pathological liar. Remember, Ted Cruz, not a Democrat, pathological liar. Some of these lies don't matter very much about golf or whatever, but some of the lies that Trump tells,
yes, it does, because it shows your character.
Yeah, but compared to, I mean, if you think about some of the lies, like that immigrants are the ones who are committing most of our crime, for instance.
Which is
right?
not true.
Right, or that lots of illegal immigrants voted in that tilted the election.
Not true.
Right. Some of these actually really have tremendously toxic consequences for lives among Americans because they breed hatred, right? And so some of these lies are really, really dangerous.
Well, the former President Barack Obama and George W. Bush also worked out. They did cardio and bicycles, and maybe this president will pick that up. Today, President Trump went golfing at Trump International Golf Club in Palm Beach County, then headed back to his Mar-a-Lago club, where he is staying through New Year's. Overall, President Trump has visited a Trump-branded property on almost a third of his days in office. I want to talk about this with CNN political commentators Alice Stewart and Simone Sanders, and Bill Kristol, editor-at-large at the Weekly Standard. Hello, I hope you guys had a great Christmas. Still more of the holidays to come.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays, since there's a war on Christmas.
Yes, and happy Kwanzaa and
yes,
Hanukkah.
Habari Ghani.
Why you got to be extra, Simone, every time?
I'm just saying, it's Kwanzaa.
Alice, President
Yes,
Trump tweeted that he is back to work. The very next thing we see is the president golfing at another Trump property. He spent 110 days as president at one of his properties. Is it surprising, given he once claimed that he wouldn't have time to golf if elected?
Is it surprising that he says one thing and does something different? No.
Yeah.
Look, we knew he was going to be this way. We knew that he was going to frequently play golf. And look, I, for one, think that he can get a lot done out on the golf course. Oftentimes, he's out there talking with members of Congress and others. He did, Perdue from Georgia was out there today, and they have some immigration issues. Look, I'm just saying he does things a lot differently than any other people with regard to business. I have never.
You don't think it's a bit hypocritical, though, that he criticized the former president so much, and he spends way more time on the golf course than the former president? That's all he did was Barack Obama is on the golf course so much, he's never in Washington. He's out of Washington and on a golf course way more than the former president ever was.
It is extremely hypocritical, but this is the president, and these are the days that we live in. This is not out of the ordinary. I, for one, I never criticize President Obama. I've never criticized any of the other presidents for golfing or horseback riding or mountain climbing whenever they did on their time off. They work extremely hard, and 24/7, 365 days a year, they are available for whatever is needed. And look, while the president was out on the golf course today, he was briefed earlier on a suicide bombing in Afghanistan, which was certainly important. But look, I think that no one should be surprised in the least that President Trump is out playing golf as much as he is. This is how he lived his life before, and it's no surprise he's doing it as president.
Simone, you don't want to say anything. I know you want to go. Go ahead, Bill.
No, well, since I don't play golf, I'm happy to criticize both President Obama and President Trump for wasting so much time walking along a big manicured set of lawns, you know, taking a stick and hitting a little ball, trying to get into a hole. Well, you know. But anyway, I just said that. I just said
more walking. This president doesn't do much walking.
That's
he's
true.
Always in the golf course.
He's more of a golf cart guy. Anyway, I just said that so 100,000 CNN viewers can go nuts and email me about how terrible it is. They don't appreciate the great sport of golf and all that.
But
I like watching it sometimes. Anyway, no, but President Trump did what he had to do today. Honestly, it was the tweet you referenced earlier, attacking the FBI earlier this morning. His main occupation, honestly, the one thing he wants to do more than anything else, I believe, and I say this seriously, is discredit the Mueller investigation, discredit the FBI, and lay the predicate for either ignoring whatever report Mueller comes up with, or I think more likely pardoning people and maybe trying to fire Mueller. I think Trump is dead serious about this. People are treating him as if he's annoyed, he's irritable. You know, isn't it funny that he tweets these things? He and his allies have systematically, at least for a month since Flynn pled guilty and it was announced that he was cooperating, since people like Hope Hicks spent time testifying before Mueller, he is systematic. He's very worried about this investigation, and he's doing his best to discredit it. And that's what he did this morning before going out to play golf.
Yeah, Simone, listen, we're off topic a little bit, but I was sitting here as I was thinking, if there's something that I'm not worried about, if someone says something about me that's not true, or I just go, hey, go look into it. Here's my phone. You can look. I didn't do it, or what have you. And I wouldn't be, calling them fake and phony. I wouldn't care. It just would not be in my orbit. He's got to be worried about something. And listen, I'm not saying there's collusion there, but he's got to be worried about something, or otherwise he wouldn't be crowing so much about it.
Yeah, I think the president is worried. I also think that this cloud of an investigation of something gone awry has been over his entire presidency. And he's probably frustrated, but look, he brought this upon himself. I have no sympathy for President Trump and the Mueller investigation, because had he not fired James Comey, the former FBI director, we wouldn't have James Mueller or a special counsel. So again, these are unforced errors that he brought upon himself, and he's going to continue to inject himself in the middle of this conversation, because somehow I think Donald Trump thinks he's smarter than all of us, but he's not. He's just making it worse, and it's high time he starts listening to the people around him.
Let's get back to what we were talking about, though, because spending so much time. Do you take umbrage with him being on the golf course so much? Because yesterday he said, look, this was a great holiday or whatever, but back to work and making America great again. And the first thing he does is plays golf for most of the day.
I absolutely take umbrage with it. One, because he criticized President Obama so much, and Donald Trump has spent more taxpayer dollars and more time on the golf course than President Obama's entire 8 years in the White House. And so there's one standard yet again for President Obama, and there's another standard for Donald Trump. One person is the first black president of the United States. The other one is, the president that pioneered the birther movement. I also think it's a problem that Trump is not just spending time on any property. These are Trump properties. He is literally using his position as the president of the United States to publicize and profit on his own personal companies. And I think that's something that folks talked about a lot in the beginning, but have not talked about as much. When we're calling the Mar-a-Lago the Winter White House, that's branding. We're doing the work of the Trump Organization for them. So I definitely think that it's not normal for a president to, be profiting off his properties while he's in the White House.
We have lots more to talk. He's always saying, this president, always saying that he doesn't get any credit for his accomplishments, but he is the one. He creates the distractions. I mean, if he wanted to talk about his accomplishments, he could have tweeted about the tax bill and just kept, talking about the tax bill all day. Is that part of the plan, though? Play the outrage game, get his opponents to react, and then claim they're against him?
I think he does want to create an atmosphere in which everybody is screeching at each other, and in which those of us who oppose him are screeching so loudly that he can say to his supporters, and more importantly, can say to all of those Americans in the squishy middle, see, I can't catch a break. This is just all-out partisan warfare. I'm no worse than they are. We're all the same. I think he wants to say that. But it's always a big question with Trump. Is he turning the page constantly, tweeting something today that's different from yesterday, stirring up a new fight because he's trying to distract us and keep us in a state of imbalance? Or is that his nature? Is that just the way he operates? I think in this case, it's both at the same time.
Well, the silliest thing, though, is this so-called war on Christmas, which I'm not sure is a shiny object, or if he's just doing it for fun, because I don't think people are that stupid that they believe that there is a war on Christmas. He has been tweeting and talking about it for some time now. On Christmas Eve, he tweeted this. He said, "People are proud to be saying Merry Christmas again. I am proud to have led the charge against the assault of our cherished and beautiful phrase, Merry Christmas." I mean, to me, this is a joke. I mean, and it's not a funny joke because there's no war on Christmas. I'm just like, what is he talking about? And I mean, are people that stupid to think that there's a war on Christmas? Does he actually believe that?
I mean, apart from his most fervent base, I don't think people are that stupid. I mean, all you have to do is comb your memory. I comb my memory, and I do not remember over the 8 Obama years feeling scared to say Merry Christmas. I don't remember hearing fewer people say Merry Christmas. And I remember Barack Obama saying Merry Christmas plenty, although Donald Trump now says that wasn't the case. He says whatever he wants. I mean, if you go back, I mean, you talked earlier in your show about Trump being again at one of his properties and again playing golf. You go back and he was constantly carping about Obama playing too much golf, Obama being outside of Washington too often.
Played way more golf.
Yeah, I mean, the Wall Street Journal ran something fascinating in the last 24, 36 hours. More than 100 days during this year, President Trump was at one of his Trump-branded properties, and many of those days he was playing golf. That's almost 1 in 3 days of the presidency. So, you know, Donald Trump doesn't live up to his own supposed standards.
This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. President Trump making a pretty astounding claim today about his accomplishments and his first year in office.
We have more legislation passed, including the record was Harry Truman a long time ago, and we broke that record, so we have a lot done.
Not even close. Not even close. The fact is that President Trump has signed fewer bills than any president going back to Eisenhower. Fewer bills than any president going back to Eisenhower. Yes, he got his tax plan just last week, but he has failed in his campaign promise to immediately repeal and replace Obamacare. He didn't do that. And that $1 trillion infrastructure bill, that was another big Trump campaign promise, now it's more like $200 billion and far from a sure thing. And speaking of facts and fiction, remember when Donald Trump said this on the campaign trail?
I'm going to be working for you. I'm not going to have time to go play golf, and believe me.
No time to play golf. And here we are, day 87 so far that the president has spent at one of his own Trump-branded golf properties. Today he golfed at the Trump International Golf Club in Palm Beach County. Though the White House refused to confirm that. Oddly enough, though, a big white truck was parked in exactly the right spot to block any view of the president, which may be a pretty good metaphor for how this White House handles inconvenient facts.
This is CNN Breaking News.
A CNN exclusive tonight. Sources telling CNN that President Trump believes the Russia investigation is coming to a close and that he expects the special counsel Robert Mueller not only to clear him, but to write a letter of exoneration. I'm going to bring in now CNN national security analyst Julia Kayyem, and a former official at the Department of Homeland Security, and CNN contributor John Dean, the former White House counsel for President Nixon. Good evening to both of you. John, CNN has learned that in private, the president has seemed, quote, less frustrated about the investigation, even boasting that he expects Mueller to clear him of wrongdoing in the coming weeks. Do you have any idea why the president is feeling so confident?
I can only imagine that his lawyers told him something that gave him that confidence. And if they did, they may well be engaging in malpractice because they have no basis that I can see, or anybody I know who follows this even closer than I do can see. I think it's wishful thinking at this point.
Do you agree with that, Juliet?
Yes, I mean, this is the same president who began this investigation assuring the American public that there had been absolutely no contacts between his campaign and the Russians. Donald Trump's statements or beliefs about this investigation have never been accurate and will probably continue not to be accurate. We should have every belief that Mueller is going to continue well into 2018. The activity so far has been fast and quick with 2 indictments and 2 guilty pleas. That is very fast, and it will continue apace. There's just no evidence that this thing is slowing down. If anything, it's getting closer to Donald Trump.
Let me read this. This is Susan Hennessy's tweet from earlier. She's our legal analyst here on CNN. She said, if Trump or his team actually believed this, wouldn't they be working to bolster or at least not undermine Mueller's legitimacy and credibility? Why work to undercut the reputation of the guy you say is about to clear you? So what do you think, Juliet? Do you believe that? Should Trump have his supporters back off of Mueller?
Well, I just think that the Trump White House must be very, very nervous about what is about to unfold in the weeks ahead, because just this campaign against Mueller is consistent with the campaign over the last year. You know, it begins with an assault on the facts, right? Russia didn't hack. Even the national security strategy today is just shocking in the fact it does not even mention that the Russians attacked our own democracy. Then there's an attack on the fact seekers, the CIA, the FBI. They're in disarray, they're horrible, they're captured, they're political. And then there's an attack now on the fact investigator, Robert Mueller. It's like in their playbook and consistent, right, with the fact that they actually don't know what's coming down the pike. So in my mind, we could have anticipated this. And in their mind, I suspect they are very nervous, maybe not about Trump, but about people very close to him, like a son or a son-in-law.
John, what do you think is behind this apparent strategy to undercut Mueller?
Well, it's happened in prior special counsel investigations. It happened during the Clinton years. There was some effort to undercut Ken Starr when they thought he'd gone purely political, and indeed some of his actions were very political. Mueller has not played it that way, though. He's played it as very much a sealed, quiet, very cautious professional that he is. So it's an effort to undercut whatever they see coming, and they must sense something serious is coming. Don, they have thrown nothing but signals that they're covering up from the very beginning. They have never shown really an effort to cooperate. They've never shown an effort to send people down to testify. They've never tried to reveal anything about what actually did happen. In fact, this information is slowly pulled out, one meeting at a time, one email at a time, and we know that Mueller knows a lot more than we do, and he obviously sees something there, or it wouldn't have been so protracted.
Yeah, Juliet, I just want to play. This is a clip of the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. It's from earlier today. Take a listen, and then we'll discuss.
I think this past weekend is illustrative of what a great case officer Vladimir Putin is. He knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president.
I just want to be clear here, though. You're saying that Russia is treating the president of the United States as an asset.
I'm saying this figuratively. I think you have to remember Putin's background. He's a KGB officer. That's what they do. They recruit assets. And I think some of that experience and instincts of Putin is coming to play here in his managing a pretty important account for him, if I could use that term, with our president.
So, Juliet, Clapper said that he was speaking figuratively. You heard that, but what do you think about that comment?
He may have been speaking figuratively, but Clapper is very careful. I don't think he would just sort of willy-nilly use words like that. And I think from any perspective, it's clear that Putin is playing Trump. He's playing up to Trump's desire to be liked and Trump's desire to be viewed as different than President Obama. But what I liked most about Jim Clapper's statement is to remind us that this is actually not about Donald Trump. We, today, a national security strategy strategy was announced. We have a homeland to protect. We have elections this coming year. And we've done absolutely nothing to defend ourselves. So while Trump may view this as about himself, it really is about our democracy. And it's sort of worth all of us remembering that each time we think about the indictments or, whether Mueller should have had those emails. I mean, it's all irrelevant to the fact that the story is that Russia took advantage of our democracy and will do so again in the year to come.
Juliette, John, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. When we come back, why the Trump administration has reportedly banned the CDC from using certain words like fetus, transgender, and science-based. Growing backlash tonight following a report that the Trump administration has ordered officials at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to stop using specific words and phrases in budget documents for 2018. Joining me now is John McWhorter, professor of linguistics at Columbia University and the author of Words on the Move. John, hello. Let's talk about words that may not be on the move here, because this is a list of 7 words the Washington Post reports the Trump administration has banned officials at the CDC from using in the budget process. The words are diversity, entitlement, evidence-based, fetus, science-based, transgender, vulnerable. Why these words, and what does that tell you about this administration?
Well, from the way I'm seeing it, it looks that these are words that people within the organization thought it would be wise to not use because they wanted to see their budgets more likely to be passed by people in the government, for example, who would be offended by words like those because they're worried about things like something being evidence-based. They don't want to hear fetuses being brought up, etc. And what that means is that we're dealing with an administration and administration culture in which people in positions of responsibility are having to basically work around the gorilla in order to get what they need to do done, such as an organization like the CDC really needs to. They have to tone down or disguise basically truth and common sense and constructiveness in order to get the money to do the things that they need to do. And that's a tragedy.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The Post says that the administration did propose some alternative phrases. So rather than using, and I'll give you some, the terms science-based or evidence-based, CDC officials should use the phrases or the phrase CDC bases its recommendation on science in consideration with community standards and wishes. I mean, what is different about the new approved technology? What is this?
Well, it's interesting because that way of putting it, for example, is a dog whistle, this idea of community standards. That is, you're trying to work with people who might be, for example, pro-life, people who don't want certain things brought up, community standard, as opposed to, for example, what we might call science. And so we're talking about people who might have the idea that evolution is, quote unquote, just a theory. And that in itself is a shame. And to the extent that just possibly we're dealing with the administration or anybody else who thinks that if you apply a new label to something, you're solving a problem. That never works. Whatever you didn't like about the label at this point, those associations will settle down upon whatever the new label is. And so there was a time when crippled was an okay term that nobody was offended by. Well, there are unfortunate associations that many people have with somebody who is quote unquote crippled, and so that word was replaced with handicapped. Then handicapped came to have the same sorts of problems. We human beings are a pretty trashy group in many ways. And so changing the words does not change the thought. Orwell, and I know everybody's waiting for me to bring him up, was wrong about that. You can't control thought that starkly with words.
Well, I want to say that because you hear the word Orwellian a lot when you read, this story. Is this how you would describe this as Orwellian?
Well, you could say that it's Orwellian in that somebody thinks that if you use different words, then you're going to change the way people think or change the situation. But the problem is, for example, here, even if you are trying to do some good by avoiding using terms that are going to rile what I think in this case are people who are Republican / right-wing / have certain ideas about, abortion or evolution that many other people don't share. If the idea is that you're going to use different words, words, frankly, that's not really going to work because those people are intelligent enough to see through your attempt to soften. I mean, they are, cognitively human just like all the rest of us. And so it wouldn't work. You have to actually try to change thought. Right. But I do think that these people are trying to do some good. It's unfortunate that they have to work that hard to do it.
All right, speaking, and I may go back to some of these words, but speaking of Orwell, here's another story from the New York Times that kind of sounds like Big Brother. The EPA employees spoke out. Then came scrutiny of their email. The Times reports that multiple EPA employees with different jobs in different cities spoke about budget cuts or climate change policies at the agency. Then a conservative campaign research group consulting with the EPA filed a FOIA, which is a Freedom of Information Act, request for all their federal emails. Why would the EPA sic an Oppo research group on its own employees?
It seems like there's some sort of surveillance. It's the usual story where we're not supposed to say anything bad about, say, the president or his policies, that we're all supposed to walk in a kind of lockstep. And that's unfortunate in this case because, of course, if you're public spirited, then part of that is understanding that there is going to be opposition and that there are different ways of doing things and that we're all working towards the same mountaintop through different paths. You don't see that in a possible practice like that one.
Yeah. So the Oppo research firm hired by the EPA specializes in, quote, war room type technology for robust intelligence gathering. Are you comfortable with the EPA spending taxpayer money on a partisan-style war room inside the agency to research its own employees?
Well, I mean, to the extent that money is being spent on something like that, that sort of monitoring is frightening because especially when you're dealing with an organization like the EPA, we're looking for innovative ideas. We're looking for people who are searching for things that might not be obvious and to monitor people. And the only reason you would monitor people is to avoid them saying certain things, is to stanch that kind of creativity and that kind of open-mindedness. So it's very dangerous.
Yeah. Listen, the CDC, we're talking about the banned words and so on. The CDC is saying that, I want to assure you, they released a statement saying, I want to assure you there are no banned words at the CDC. We will continue to talk about all of our important public health programs. And that's what the CDC says. But when words are banned, emails are targeted, reporters and news outlets are under attack, is freedom of speech at risk with this administration?
Yes, I do think that there's a real problem here where it almost seems as if the president or just a culture that's beginning to surround the president really do believe that people shouldn't be allowed to be too, we might say, seditious in reference to the president. And the problem with this is that I don't even think that there's a philosophical or pragmatic orientation behind it. The idea isn't we want to get things done and therefore we want to keep a united front and hide argument behind all of that. What it's really just about is that the person running the country doesn't like being criticized because he's a very insecure and narcissistic man. That is what's percolating out into the culture, that you shouldn't say anything bad about him and his policies. But this comes not from a hard-headed pragmatism that you might from some perspective admire, but it just comes from the bullheadedness of the individual that happens to be running the country and isn't public spirited enough to see beyond his tiny self. That's what's unfortunate about all this.
John McWhorter, the author of Words on the Move. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Don.
We'll be right back. In the Russia investigation, but that's not stopping Team Trump's efforts to discredit Robert Mueller. Let's discuss now. John Flannery's here. He's a former federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. CNN political commentator David Swerdlick and former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti. Good evening to all three of you, gentlemen. John, you first. President Trump was asked yesterday if he is planning on firing Robert Mueller. His answer was, no, I'm not. For the White House, they're discrediting Mueller and his team. Even better than, is that firing? Even better than firing him?
I think it's part of the same thing. I think if Trump was allowed to be Trump, he would have fired him ages ago. And I think that's always a looming possibility. But I think they've convinced him that by attacking Mueller in any way that they can, that maybe they'll diminish his effectiveness, maybe he'll go away.
But John, how can you attack him and then say, I expect to be exonerated then?
We're talking about Mr. Trump. Consistency is not one of his problems. And, look at the letter that they did with the GSA. They send it on a Saturday, so it's on the Sunday talk shows, and they don't go to court and complain about it. You know, all of it is pretty transparent. And then they ask the Congress, they have the Judiciary Committee ask the Attorney General to then investigate other things. And I think it's all a policy of obstruction. It's a little more subtle than just flat out firing someone. But I think the option's always there. And if they can't tie Trump to a wall someday, he will fire Mueller, and that'll be catastrophic.
So I've been, listen, David, I listen to everything and watch everything, right, from left to right. Right-wing media has been trying to discredit Mueller for months. I want you to watch. This is Jeanine Pirro on her Fox show this weekend.
There's a core group of arrogant, corrupt, and lawless individuals that felt that they, and not we, should decide a presidential election. And when they failed, they conspired to create the false narrative to not just muddy our choice for president, but to bring down his presidency and his family as well. The only thing that remains is whether we have the fortitude to not just fire these people immediately, but to take them out in cuffs.
She was a judge, right? It's probably a good thing she's not practicing anymore. But listen, her show is said to be a Trump favorite. She's even visited the president at the White House. How dangerous are comments like this?
It's dangerous for a couple of reasons. One, if she wants to be an objective journalist and offer opinions, then you would think she would want to hold the president himself at a little more of arm's length. But as you just said, and as has been reported, they sort of chit-chat offline and talk to each other and compare notes. At least that's what the reporting says. More specifically, Don, if you, in the clip that you just played, and I know that wasn't her entire soliloquy, but at least in that clip, she doesn't specify any situation or any fact which she says the Mueller investigation has gotten wrong or any procedure that they haven't followed. She's just talking in this swirl of, the president's enemies are out to get him. If that's really the case, if that's her argument, she should state where procedure was breached, where someone didn't follow protocol, what facts are wrong, why Flynn's plea deal is wrong, or why Manafort's indictment is wrong, but she goes to none of the specifics. Look, I'm not sure that Mueller is going to be fired, Don, if for no other reason than when Director Comey was fired is when the public's attention was really focused on the Russia investigation. And you've got to imagine that the White House staff is saying, if we fire Mueller, this is just going to, turn up the heat on this whole thing all over again. But this campaign that you see in certain media outlets and from some people in the government and from some of the Trump team's lawyers to discredit or undermine or throw the Mueller team off of their scent has really ratcheted up in the last couple of weeks.
It's just interesting. I mean, I'm sure it tastes good. Those words coming out of her mouth sounds good to the listener and the president. She goes, "Ooh, the president's going to like if I say this, and the viewers are going to like if I say that," instead of just saying what is actually.
But there's no specifics.
That's what I mean. There's no specific, and there are no facts here, which is very, very interesting. So listen, the Trump transition. Go ahead.
Well, the prize is you get to go to Mar-a-Lago. I mean, she has one audience member at least who's just loving this. This is his nightlight, to just replay her. Yeah. And she's as much as an egomaniac as the fellow who enjoys it. And I did her show once, and she insists you call her judge, which I wouldn't do, which was very upsetting to her.
Well, I mean, listen, it's not a personal attack. You can see it all. You can see it all working there. How it works. The viewer loves to hear it. The president loves to hear it, and she likes the attention and the accolade. So listen, Trump transition. This is for Ronaldo. Trump transition lawyers say that Mueller's team unlawfully obtained thousands of emails from the transition team. In a rare statement, Mueller's team pushed back, saying in part, "When we have obtained emails in the course of our ongoing criminal investigation, we have secured either the account owner's consent or appropriate criminal process." So, Renato, you say this is a publicity stunt and not a serious legal challenge from the president's team. Why is that?
Well, these emails were on a government server. And there was actually contracts that were signed by the transition team saying that there is no expectation of privacy as to those emails. And that essentially ends this from a Fourth Amendment perspective. If you don't have an expectation of privacy, no one needs a warrant. It's like, for example, when you're using your employer's computer, for example, you know that when you're using CNN's computer, Don, your employer can go through it. Here they were using the transition that was using a government computer. They signed documents saying there's no expectation of privacy. That pretty much ends it. What they did here is they wrote a letter that essentially, if you're a lawyer and read it, you can read between the lines, they essentially admit that. They write the letter, I think as John was mentioning a moment ago, on a Saturday to Congress as opposed to Mueller. If they had a real legal argument, they would have gone to Mueller or gone to a court. There's really nothing there. And, it's more of trying to undermine Mueller. And I will tell you, I think what's happening now, we're starting to see that instead of making a decision to fire Mueller, what the Trump team has decided is that it's in their best interest to keep Mueller around, at least for now, and to try to discredit him. And it's led to that hateful rhetoric we just heard, which was obviously this conspiracy theory, over the top, unsupported, and very dangerous rhetoric. That's where it's leading.
Hey, John, how significant is it, if you can, a quick answer, because I want to get David in for one if I can. How significant is it that Mueller was forced to defend himself here?
Well, I think that he's feeling the pressure, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see an indictment before the end of the year to signal that this is very serious. I was surprised by that, and I think I would have said something like, if you had anything, you would have tried to take me to court or written to me personally. And they talk about a lawyer's privilege. What lawyer? Executive privilege. He wasn't yet the executive. So it's a very thin posturing politically, I think.
There was another point that I intended to make in the whole thing. We were talking about the soundbite there. Listen, most of the people on the transition team and the people, these are appointed people. People were appointed by the President of the United States, or Republicans, or career people who were in there. So how is it that there is some sort of coup or something that's happening from people, David, that the president appointed himself?
Yeah, and if you recall, Don, when Mueller was first appointed back in May, I mean, this was only 7 or 8 months ago. When he was first appointed back in May, you had Republicans on the Hill. You had Republican notables like former Speaker Newt Gingrich speaking about how Mueller was a man of the highest integrity, how they thought it was a good pick, how he would get to the bottom of things. And now that the investigation has sort of dragged out and has bogged the administration down, now you're seeing a situation where more supporters of the president are criticizing this. I would just point out, Don, real quick, that, look, anybody that's an adversary of the president that thinks that, a shoe is going to drop and the administration is going to crumble, I think they're going to be waiting a long time for that. Similarly, for the president's supporters, whether it's Judge Jeanine or someone else who think that this is going to, or the president himself, who think that this is just going to wrap up neatly in a few weeks and, we'll wipe our hands and move on, nothing to see here. Neither side is going to have that. Mueller's going about this in a very methodical, specific, meticulous way, not talking a lot to the press, and we will find out as things develop, as we have over the last several months.
And that is the truth. You all three of you are very smart gentlemen, but that was the smartest thing that was said here. I agree with you on your entire point there, David. It's not that easy on either side. Yeah.
One step at a time.
Thank you very much. When we come back,
Thanks,
PBS has dropped Tavis Smiley's show after what's being called troubling allegations against him. Tonight, he is fighting back. I'm going to talk to him. That's next. Tavis Smiley, who hosted his own nightly interview show on PBS since 2004, fighting back tonight against what PBS calls troubling allegations about his conduct, but the network is standing by its decision to suspend his show. Joining me now is Tavis Smiley. Thank you so much.
Don, good to see you, man.
How are you
all
doing?
right? I'm well. And yourself?
Are you getting any rest? Because these are troubling allegations.
Not much rest at all, but I can tell you that we've had a bit of breaking news in this case. When I first came out a week ago and commented about this, I said very clearly that I had never groped, coerced, or inappropriately exposed myself to anyone. I said then that PBS had rushed to judgment here, that they had engaged a sloppy investigation. Essentially, they had not connected the dots and done their job. We just received a letter a couple hours ago from PBS after my appearance on Good Morning America today. And now, after 3 weeks of imploring them to talk to my staff, to my COO, to my HR people, to debunk whatever it is they've heard, which they refuse to do, they have now sent a letter this afternoon asking if they can meet with those very same people. This is after you've dragged my name through the mud, after you've trampled on my reputation, after you have impacted my earnings, after my sponsors have walked away from me, now you want to come back and continue the investigation as a result of what happened today.
Do you think, and they released a statement after your interview this morning on the morning program, but do you think this changes the allegations against you? Because
the allegations have always been anonymous to me.
Okay.
What I have said consistently, again, is I have never groped, coerced, or exposed myself to anyone. I've never instructed anyone in my company to take any employment decision based upon my relationship status. And the bottom line is they did a sloppy investigation, and now they want to come back and continue what they should have done before they made this rush to judgment decision.
All right, these are the accusations, and then I want to read what they said. This is according to Variety. According to sources, MSK, which is a firm they hired, right, took reports from 10 witnesses, a mix of men and women of different races and employment levels in Smiley's organization, most of them former staffers. The investigation found credible allegations that Smiley had engaged in sexual relationships with multiple subordinates, sources said. Some witnesses interviewed expressed concern that their employment status was linked to the status of a sexual relationship with Smiley. 10 witnesses, credible allegations, multiple subordinates. That seems pretty significant.
That statement has a lot in it. First of all, men and women. We don't know, because I don't know what the accusations are. I don't know what the allegations are, who the accusers were. I don't know what that number of men and women is. What if it's 8 men and 2 women? Not to suggest that 2 women's stories don't matter, but after 30 years of being in business, I've hired a lot of folk and we've fired a lot of folk. And there are some folk who have some axes to grind. And I don't think this moment is a moment that should be used, this important moment in this country, talking about how to create a healthy workplace. This should not be used on to exploit, wanting to grind, should not be used in an exploitative way to grind an axe or to seek revenge on someone. And so, again, I sat for 3 hours in these conversations. I was never told what the allegations were, who the accusers were, never allowed to provide any evidence, was not given due process, what happened to a presumption of innocence in this country. So again, you're reading a statement that they told a Variety, and they didn't tell me this stuff. I learned more from that Variety article than I learned in 3 hours of a face-to-face conversation.
So what does it change for you now that they are going to, you said that they're going to...
They've asked to talk to the persons on my staff who run the company, who make all of the employment decisions. We said that 3 weeks ago, and they refused to do it. They made this rush to judgment, trampled on me. Now they want to come back and continue the investigation.
Do you think that would change, though, again, the allegations against you? Do you think that would change?
I repeat again, when you don't know what the allegations against you are, it's hard to answer that question. What I do know is that it shows again, I think we're missing the key point here. It shows again
that they rushed to judgment.
Exactly, and did a sloppy investigation. Yeah. So how do you come back today? Yeah. How do you come back today after all this national outpouring, this national outrage about the way this investigation was conducted, that you denied me due process? How do you come back now?
So you're saying they should have done that before releasing all this information?
Yeah, sure.
So this is what, after your interview this morning, they said, Tavis Smiley needs to get his story straight. First, today on Good Morning America, Mr. Smiley acknowledged he had had multiple sexual encounters with his employees, then struggled to recall the number of current employees with whom he had had sex. This contradicts his Facebook post from last week, where he cited only one previous relationship with an employee. I'm going to stop there, and then we'll put it back up. You want to? Yeah. What do you say to that?
I don't know what interview they were watching. Number one, I didn't disconnect anything. What I said in my statement was that if having a consensual relationship with a colleague, I didn't say one colleague, I said a colleague. I'm talking about a colleague, a coworker. So I never said one, number one. So I didn't change my story this morning on Good Morning America. I told the truth this morning, and I told the truth in my statement, number one. What else do you have that you want?
How many colleagues have you had consensual relationships?
That very question conflates consensual relationships with sexual assault, sexual harassment, and sexual misconduct. That's not the right question, quite frankly.
Why not? Why do you say?
I just told you why. Because that very question conflates a consensual relationship with sexual harassment or sexual assault, and those two things don't.
I understand that, but we can talk about that. But that doesn't mean that if I've had a consensual relationship with someone in the workplace, wouldn't I know how many
that's not,
had? And I can explain to you this was consensual and this wasn't.
Exactly. And I know what was consensual. First of all, there was nothing that was not consensual. I've only had in my entire life. I've only had consensual relationships. And most of them, over 30 years of working in this industry, most of them clearly were not in the workplace. So we're talking about a handful of conversations.
Mr. Smiley even told viewers, I don't know where your heart is going to lead you. PBS is certain that it should not lead to multiple sexual relationships between the owner of a company and subordinates over many years, particularly where employment decisions may be linked to sex. So if a woman is, even though you say it's consensual, but a woman may feel obliged to go along with it because she's concerned about her employment. That's how most people would read that.
Here again, this is PBS's rhetoric. So today, we go back to the beginning of this conversation. Today, they finally agreed to talk to the persons who could have addressed those issues had they raised these questions with those persons 3 weeks ago. My point is, how do you put those kinds of statements out, without ever having talked to the folk who were responsible for making these decisions? And here's the last question for me, is that why are you making these statements to the press? Why are you talking to the press and not my attorneys? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they know how to contact my attorneys, but they keep making these comments in the press rather than talking to my attorneys.
You understand the power dynamic, though.
Absolutely.
If you are the president of the company, Tavis, and you're having a relationship with someone, should you have known better?
What I said this morning, I stand by, which is that there are people who have an opinion that there is no such thing, Don, as a consensual relationship in the workplace. I respect that decision, and I hear that. In my company, we have a policy that does not encourage office relationships, but it doesn't forbid them. Because again, I don't want to tell people who they should hang out with, who they should fall in love with. And there's so many relationships in this country that were started in the workplace. Henry Kissinger met his wife in the workplace. Bill Gates met his wife in the workplace. We all know Barack Obama met Michelle Obama in the workplace. So my point is that relationships can start in the workplace. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But let's not act like we don't live in a society where people work and meet each other all the time, and sometimes things jump off.
So your point is, you think, obviously, we've been having this back and forth, you think that everything is being conflated. A consensual relationship and someone who is abusive in the relationship, from Harvey Weinstein to the person who met his wife, you think they're all being lumped in one category?
That's what they've attempted to do with me. I am not Harvey Weinstein. And I don't know all the particulars of his case. I don't want to prejudge him. What I'm suggesting to you is that I, again, have never groped, coerced, exposed myself to anyone. The sin that I've committed, the great sin, is to have over 30 years a handful of consensual relationships. And if that's the crime, if we're going to start criminalizing people for having legitimate relationships as consenting adults, if that's the crime, then let's just say that. But don't drag me through the mud, damage my reputation, and then come back and say, okay, we're going to continue the investigation.
Would you do, considering all the high-profile people, all the big personalities, the people who have lost their platforms, their jobs, their livelihoods, would you do anything differently now?
Oh, as you know, I've been on this program before. I've written a couple of books. 2 specifically come to mind, talking about the mistakes I've made and the lessons I've learned. There are a number of things I did, 25, 30 years ago that I wouldn't do now. But even again, if one or two of those consensual relationships was a case of misjudgment, I ask you, does that misjudgment rise to the level of public shaming, personal destruction, and wrongful termination? For me, it does not. Not for me or anybody else.
What about the women who feel, according to this investigation, that they were hurt by you? What do you say to them? Do you apologize to them?
I don't know. Again, I am more than happy to apologize to anyone I've offended. But I repeat again, I was never told who the accusers were. I don't know what the allegations were. And in a consensual relationship, as you know, you can prove what a consensual relationship is. You've got letters, cards, gifts, text messages.
Texting is one way you have a relationship.
Photographs, but who doesn't? That's the world we live in nowadays. But again, I was never asked, never given an opportunity to prove that something was consensual because it was never raised in that meeting.
Everybody's lost it. A lot of people lost their jobs.
Yeah.
And people didn't get to go to the Senate because of all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How is Tavis Smiley different? Tavis Smiley is innocent of all this?
Tavis Smiley has only had consensual relationships. And speaking of people who've lost jobs, that's how I feel. I've got a staff full of people because of PBS's rush to judgment who are now in the unemployment line during the holiday season. And that does not make me happy.
Do you plan to take legal action against them?
My attorneys are looking into that right now. I don't want to get ahead of them. I will tell you this, that if this in fact does end up in court, because now that they've come back and asked to continue the investigation, it's a little late on a certain level. If this does end up in court, the real tragedy is that millions of taxpayer dollars are going to be spent for PBS to defend itself against this bad decision, and that's not how I think the American people want their tax dollars spent.
Tavis, thank you.
Thank you, Don.
And when we come back, a report tonight that President Trump considered rescinding the Supreme Court nomination of Neil Gorsuch after Gorsuch criticized him. Sounds like loyalty is not exactly a two-way street in this White House. We all know how much President Trump values loyalty, but a new report tonight suggests that that need for loyalty could have cost him a major accomplishment. Let's discuss now. CNN political commentators Angela Ryan, Scott Jennings, both here. Hello to both of you. Scott, you first. The Washington Post reporting tonight that earlier this year, President Trump considered rescinding his nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court due to a perceived lack of loyalty on Gorsuch's part. specifically when Gorsuch expressed displeasure with the president's attacks on the judiciary. Does this president need thicker skin? What do you think of this?
I think the Washington Post tonight is playing gossip girl here for no reason at all. I mean, the reality is I went to breakfast this morning and considered having a cheese Danish and made a much better decision to have bacon and eggs. So the president did the right thing. He left Gorsuch up. It's his main accomplishment this year. It's a great one. And I don't see what the big deal is.
Ansel, do you see what the big deal is? Do you agree with Scott?
Of course I don't agree. I think the challenge that I have here is this word that keeps coming up and it permeates this administration. And Donald Trump is under the delusion and the illusion that people owe him a loyalty pledge rather than taking that oath, passing the bar as now Justice Gorsuch had to do. And his oath is to uphold the Constitution. In his role as a Supreme Court justice, it is to ensure that he interprets the Constitution. I'm not always going to, and probably 9 times out of 10 won't agree with how his interpretation plays out. But he does not owe Donald Trump his loyalty. He owes his loyalty to the bench. There are 3 branches of government. The judiciary is one. And I don't know how many times we've said, whether it was during the campaign, whether it was during the transition period, or it was after he was sworn into office, this is not normal. This is not an authoritarian government. There are 3 branches of government, all to hold one or the other accountable. This is not about your cheese Danish, Scott. This is about ensuring that you understand that you have to uphold the law, not Donald Trump's fragile ego.
Okay, but let me put it this way, because Judge Gorsuch is often among the accomplishments that this president touts, right? Him joining the Supreme Court. So that's one of the first things he mentions. He could have, his need for a loyalty test, that could have cost him big, because then, maybe by the end of the year he'll have the tax cut or the tax overhaul as an accomplishment. But so far he doesn't have any major legislative achievement. Wouldn't that have hurt him, Scott?
Well, it would have hurt him if they had pulled Gorsuch down, but they didn't. And I think best I can see here, Neil Gorsuch had sent the president a letter expressing his gratitude for being nominated, which is an appropriate thing to do. Someone in the mailroom misplaced it. It finally made it to the president's desk. And I think maybe the president here didn't realize that part of the issue with Supreme Court justice nominees is they frequently get asked, almost always get asked, will you have any trouble whatsoever ruling against this administration that nominated you? And of course, Gorsuch answered it just right. I don't have trouble ruling against anybody if that's what the law and the facts call for. So I think what we have here is a president who made a good decision, a Supreme Court justice who is making good decisions in his new job, people who are acting appropriately in sort of a gossip column tonight that really doesn't have any bearing on the facts as they exist today. This is a major presidential accomplishment, and Gorsuch is a great justice.
Scott, I just want to push back on you a little bit, though. This buzzword loyalty that came up when we talked about FBI Director Comey's firing. This is an issue, and I think technically you can call this a gossip girl or a gossip boy column if you want to, but to me this is a red flag and something that, again, should go towards whether there's any type of obstruction of justice issue. Not because he's intending to, but perhaps because he doesn't know any better. Like he doesn't know any better about whether or not folks ask Senate confirmed, or folks that have to get Senate confirmation, whether it's to the judiciary or to serve in the cabinet. This is a big issue. Your loyalty pledge is not to the president. Your loyalty is to this country and trying to make decisions that are constitutionally appropriate.
I want to change the subject here. This is another Washington Post report. The White House planning and this is them, quote, a full throttle campaign to plunge the president into midterm elections, adding that aides have met with 116 candidates for office in recent months. Angela, is that a smart move?
To meet with candidates?
Yeah, and to plunge this president into midterm elections.
I think they need to do whatever they can. Again, we are talking about his ego. He needs to feel like he's winning, right? It's supposed to be the most times America's ever won. He needs to start with midterm results. Right now, if you're looking at special elections, that's certainly not his track record.
I just want to ask, because, Scott, it's no secret the president is facing historically low approval rating. So I ask the same question to you.
Yeah, I lived through a cycle like this in 2006 when I was in the White House Office of Political Affairs under George W. Bush. We had a president that had a low approval rating, and so we had to decide strategically where was the best place for the president to campaign. He wouldn't have been helpful in all districts or in all states, but there were places where he was helpful. I can tell you one place where the president and vice president, no matter their approval rating, is always helpful, and that is on the fundraising circuit. Vice President Pence has been out there raising money for candidates in the party. The president, if he so chooses to do it, would be an enormous fundraising draw for just about any candidate, party, committee, whatever, out there anywhere in the country. So my advice would be for the president, if he wants to really make an impact, hit the fundraising circuit and then let his political affairs shop, which is led, by the way, by a very smart operative named Bill Stepien, let them decide strategically where he makes the most sense for public events.
All right, when we come back, Don Jr., Senator Ted Cruz, and a cookie with the former President Obama's face on it. What do they have to do with each other? We'll explain. Angela and Scott are back with me. I want to play part of the president's national security speech today.
A nation without borders is not a nation. A nation that does not protect prosperity at home cannot protect its interests abroad. A nation that is not prepared to win a war is a nation not capable of preventing a war. A nation that is not proud of its history cannot be confident in its future. And a nation that is not certain of its values cannot summon the will to defend them.
All right, there's a lot to discuss there, but Angela, let's take the last line where he says a nation that is not proud of its history cannot be confident in its future. What do you think that means, what he means by that?
I have no idea. What I can tell you that is most concerning to me is that I have no real clue about whether or not Donald Trump understands what our true history is. I don't think that there's a requirement that we have to be proud of everything in America's past to be able to move forward, right? I think that that's actually asinine. Like, there are a number of things that we should not be proud of. And I think that the most important thing we can do to take a step forward and to ensure that the country is putting its best foot forward is to recognize the many challenges in our history. The fact that he talks about borders, standing up borders, and that a nation without borders isn't a nation at all. A lot of those ideas are circular and ridiculous. And again, I think even the America First ideology is also ridiculous. Donald Trump has consistently demonstrated that self-preservation is most important to him, even if it means scapegoating people on his own team. Yeah. I hardly think that's a foreign policy and a national security agenda and strategy that will work.
Yeah. I want to put this up, Scott, because this is, a lot of folks have been talking about this. This is Donald Trump Jr. posted this picture of himself and Senator Ted Cruz yesterday with a cookie that appears to show the face of President Barack Obama. The Instagram caption says, "With friends like these, some good friends decided that while my birthday is not for 2 weeks, that they would get me an early 40th birthday cake. And what birthday is complete without an Obama cake? I figured it was so good that I would have to share it with Ted." What do you think? Was it appropriate? Because it caused a bit of a stir online.
You know, I'm proud to see the evolution of the Cruz relationship with the Trumps. I mean, we've gone from the president, then candidate, accusing Ted Cruz's dad of assassinating JFK to him posing with the president's son in an Obama cake. So if Barack Obama accomplished one thing, bringing the Cruzes and the Trumps together, hey, that's an accomplishment we can all be proud of. So good for
Seriously? Meanwhile, the cake looks more like Tavis Smiley.
It was a cookie.
Or whatever it was.
Yeah.
The cookie, it looks like Tavis Smiley. That does not look like Barack Obama. Sorry.
Well, they didn't
Did you
make
see it, Don?
I saw it.
Roll that back.
What did we say?
Maybe kind of Grant Hill.
Like Grant Hill, yeah. Oh, well. Y'all are crazy.
You give up. You're like, forget it.
I do forget it. I was
about
just
it.
like, you know.
Who is that on the cake? I mean,
I can't believe that
like
Don
Tavis.
Jr. would make that face and send it out. But
yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
Well, I mean, are you guys some sort of like cake boss, cake artist that I don't know about?
No,
Could you do
but
a better
like-
job? I mean, it's like really difficult to draw a picture on a piece of paper, let alone a cake.
But
Leave
that's
this
why I
guy
don't do it
alone.
for a
Believe you,
living.
are you really fighting this like it's a big deal? Like, number one, like we're all laughing about it. It's not that serious, but it doesn't look like Barack Obama. It's just because it's red, white, and blue and a black guy doesn't make it Barack Obama.
We are going to have our cake and eat it too. I didn't know what else to say. Bye, y'all. Good night. That's it for us. Thanks for watching.